Good evening, everyone. We are back here at the Dr. Marquita Blades show. We had a small technical difficulty there, but I'm going to start over, reintroduce you to my guest, Dr. Curtis Jones, who is the superintendent of Bibb County Schools in Macon, Georgia. And as I learned while we were getting our technology back on track, he is the former school superintendent of Griffin, Spalding County Schools, again, my beloved Griffin, Georgia. I was born, raised, and graduated from high school. Dr. Jones, immediately upon stepping into the role of superintendent in Bibb County, started to work on the district's strategic plan, Victory in Our Schools, with a focus on the vision. Each student demonstrates strength of character and is college and career ready. He spent 20 years working in the field of education as an ROTC instructor, a principal at the high school level, and also an assistant superintendent. And prior to becoming an educator, he served 20 years in the United States Army, from which he retired as a lieutenant colonel. He is also a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. And I failed to mention earlier that he is married. His wife, Evelyn, is an elementary school principal. They have 3 children and 2 children. And now I'll also reintroduce Representative Valencia Stovall, who is a Southeast Atlanta native. She represents District 74, which includes Morrow, Lake City, Forest Park, and College Park. She has a passion for economic development and education reform, coupled with a strong, diverse background in finance, retail operations, business development, and public policy. Earlier, I listed some of the committees that she's worked on, to include education, medical cannabis, the Georgia Small Business Development and Job Creation. She's as a commissioner on the Georgia Council for the Arts and Governor Deal's Education and Reform Commission. She served on the House Study Committees on post-secondary options for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and fibroids education and awareness. And as I was saying before, I just didn't even know that that was something that was being studied. So I'm very excited to learn more about that. Representative Stovall is the proud mother of Lavette and Christy. She's an alumni of Southside High School, which is now Maynard Jackson High School. She also graduated from Fort Valley State and my alma mater, Georgia State University. So welcome, Dr. Jones and Representative Stovall.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that, the opportunity.
Today we're going to be talking about best practices for school turnaround. And so Dr. Jones and Representative Stovall will both share the work that they're currently doing to reform schools throughout the state of Georgia. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Jones. Can you just tell us a little bit about, first of all, your background, and then what are some of the current instructional priorities for Bibb County Schools?
So as you mentioned, I've been superintendent now in Bibb for 3 years, starting my 4th year. And the work that we've been doing is working with our 34 schools, trying to improve our educational outcomes. When we arrived, Bibb County had gone through a system where the district was on accreditation from Advanced Ed or SACS, and we were able to get off probation and now have moved forward. And the focus of that has been working with the community to try and improve, 1, their perception of us, 2, build their trust with us, and then 3, allow us the opportunity to work with their students. And I'm very happy to say over the last 3 years we've been able to do that.
Great. So can you share maybe some specific strategies that you all have implemented to get the gains, to see the gains that you have?
Sure. So we started off with the basics. I kind of believe that you just have to be able to do those basic things. And whenever a superintendent comes in, people are afraid.
Yes.
They don't know what the changes are going to be. They're not sure what's going to happen. And so we looked at what Bibb was already doing and decided we thought we could do them better. So one example of that was a thing called PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, where you're able to go in and talk to students about this is how you conduct yourself in the office, in the hallway, in the restroom, in the classroom. And if we teach you those expectations, now we expect you to follow through. BIB had already been doing PBIS. They were working with the university here in Georgia. But the State Department had taken on that idea, and we decided we wanted to implement it the same way the state was talking about. So we took every school and put them back through the training. And we just said we're going to implement it with fidelity. A second non-negotiable we had is called RTI, response to interventions, where you're able to take students who are not achieving either academically or behavior, and we say, this is what we're now going to do to intervene. Again, BIB and other school systems are already implementing that, but you have to be strategic. You have to be intentional, and so we focused on that. We also focused on teacher keys and leader keys. I believe if the school system's going to improve, the adults in the system have to improve. That comes about because of evaluations. And so teacher keys and leader keys was something BIB had started working on with Race to the Top that started back around 2010, 2009-10. And they were implementing it, and it was running out, but people were using those two systems more in a compliance mode. Mm-hmm. And I believe that you have to use evaluations to grow from. So we implemented both of those, and we made it something we talked about every day to our teachers and to our principals. And then finally, the last non-negotiable we started off with, as we were trying to go through this, ended up being a thing called FIP, Functional Behavior, FIP, Formative Instructional Practices. Thank you very much, Ms. Jones, where we're able to say to teachers, this is what you do, and this is how you teach. This is how you get students to take ownership for what they're doing. BIB, again, was already doing all of those things, but we wanted to take it to another level and let them know that when we came in on day one in April of 2015, we'll still be talking about it 3 years later, and we've been able to do that. That was the foundation for how we started.
How did you get your teachers to buy into specifically going back and retraining on something that they'd already trained on?
So part of that was getting them to buy into me and being able to recognize that I was somebody who they could identify with. Again, as you talked about, they're worried about who's this military guy that's going to come in? Are we going to make everybody continue to wear uniforms? What's going to happen with all these other changes he's going to put in place? And so I'll be quite honest. My mother was a teacher. My dad was a teacher. My wife is an educator. I have a son who is in education as well. And so I shared that story with them. I started off by telling them I grew up in Barnesville. I told them I grew up on Railroad Street. I told them about my best friends. I told them about the struggles that we had. I let them recognize and relate to my high school experience. And then I said, I learned when I was in the military that you have to sometimes go back and just do things well. Are you happy with where you are, or do you think you can improve? And in working with that premise, they were able to say, we're going to buy in. I'll have to tell you this, though. Because BIB had had 7 superintendents in 5 years when I arrived, they were very excited when I came. I'll be honest, it was a great reception that they gave me. And they bought into the idea of, we're going to make this work. And so I felt the community being there to help us with those changes. And I had teachers tell me that as well. And so it really was different than most situations when a superintendent goes in. I had people wishing that we would be successful. And because of that, we were able to say, these are the things you're already doing. Let's just go in and do them better. And people wanted to show us that. And so I'm going to say about 75% of the people bought into those first non-negotiables that we put in place, and we just ran with it and just continued to report on them every month and gave it back. Here's how we ended up making it work. This past year, which was year 3, we took those 5 items as well as some others, and we put in place a thing called pay for performance, where we wanted to be able to say, we're going to recognize you for doing these things well. We've been coming out for 2 years now, 2.5 years. We've been measuring them, and now we're going to take that to the next level. And so the board agreed that for those individuals that did well, we would give them up to 2% of their salary as a performance bonus if we were able to hit our marks. But here's the difference. It didn't just apply to teachers or administrators. It applied to everyone: custodians, nutrition workers, bus drivers, front office staff, everybody except me. Because I wanted them to know that it was not about me trying to get more money. It was about us coming together as a team. And we had our advanced ed visit this past November. Advanced ed gave us a great score. You may know that the score for advanced ed is from 100 to 400. We scored like a 347, highest score I'd ever heard of it up until that point in time. And we were also the first to go in under this new system. Based on that and the other returns we got, we gave everybody the full 2% during Teacher Appreciation Week. But that comes about because of the hard work that they have been doing and buying into what we were trying to get accomplished.
Congratulations on all of the gains, and congratulations, teachers in Bibb County, for that performance, I guess, incentive is what we'll call it, for earning that, because that is something that's controversial in other districts, and I think a lot of people don't really understand how it works, and so they automatically assume that my entire pay is going to be hinging on the performance, but it's typically as an incentive. As
we
you
had about
stated.
15 different items that we were measuring, but we reported on it every month, and we told teachers this is how it works. One example is just with attendance. So we said we would like to see our students have better attendance this year than last year, but then we wanted teachers to have a higher attendance rate than students, administrators to have a higher attendance rate than teachers. And so we were able to measure that, and we gave them the immediate feedback, and those schools that were lagging had an opportunity to catch up and improve. So it was in some ways fun. I would say in some ways stressful. Probably the thing I liked most was I got an email from a teacher that said, 1, I didn't think it was going to happen. 2, it came sooner than I thought. 3, it was more than I thought. And 4, I'm very happy. And so that turned out to be pretty successful, and our board, I'm very thankful, gave us the opportunity because, like you said, they were skeptical initially of this pay for performance and what it looks like.
All right, Representative Stovall, you serve on the House Committee on Education Reform. So can you speak about what some of the current priorities are on that committee?
Okay, so that specific committee convened in 2015, so it's no longer a committee now, active committee, but some of the things that were recommendations from those committees, you're now kind of seeing some of those things take place. One of them was dealing with, when you talk about charter schools, was increasing the level of funding for those state charter schools, which is a bill that was passed and signed by Governor Deal. House Bill 787 was one of the things that came out of that. Even with the assessment, more accountability for charter schools. Last session, we passed legislation centering around that. The other one we kind of got into, we now have a new chief turnaround officer for the state up under the arms of the state board, but working with the Department of Education. And so he has kind of had a focus in some of the rural areas. Has not come to Metro yet, but his goal is to get all of those schools that were on that bottom percentage of performance as far as with the CCRPI to get them above that 60 mark. And so I know he's done some work. We were just having a conversation down in Bibb County, and I think it's working out well because one of his strategies was not to go in hammer heavy, but going in and seeing how to be able to work collaboratively with the school districts.
So I know one of your personal priorities right now is school security. About that work a little bit.
So this past legislative session, usually when there's a big issue going on in the state of Georgia, we as legislators decide that we want to do a study committee. And we usually do that before introducing any legislation, or if it gets too controversial, the best way might be doing a study committee to kind of hear what everyone's opinion is about it and hear from the experts as well. So one particular one had to do with the school safety and with all the things that were going on around nationally, around the United States when it comes to school security. Bill was introduced, resolution that was passed, and as legislators we can put a recommendation in and ask, request to be on certain committees that are study committees, and so this is one of the ones I was assigned to. And the reason I was very interested in it with being on the House Education Committee and seeing a lot of things that are going on in education across the state, I really want to kind of be on the ground floor to kind of seeing what is being done across the state and some of the suggestions. So we held our first meeting in May in Dawson County, and so we got a chance to hear from those local sheriffs and superintendents. And so that was the kind of framework of that first meeting that we had. And it was very interesting. We also had Assistant Superintendent, State Superintendent Dr. Gary McGivney, who gave an extensive presentation on all what we've been doing across the state centered around school security. One thing that we did pass as a general legislative body was to allow school systems to decide whether they want to arm their staff, faculty and staff.
Yeah,
And so that became very controversial. And so you have a lot of mixed feelings. And so being able to kind of hear what happens in rural Georgia, being up from Metro Atlanta, so some things I think are not as applicable in Metro Atlanta, but it might be a big issue in rural Georgia. And in that particular instance, when you start talking about arming the administrators in those areas, a lot of them, especially in the very rural parts, the closest sheriff might be 50 miles away that can get to the school. So when you talk about, every second makes a difference, then you kind of say, oh, okay, I can see why it might have been relevant there. But in the metro, I don't know about that.
Right,
so
right.
We got a chance to hear our sides, got a chance to hear some of the strategies that places like Forsyth, Georgia was doing, and Cumming, Forsyth County. I always get the two Forsyths mixed up. And so one of the things that they actually were doing, and I think it might have been Forsyth, but one of them, they've actually installed cameras in each one of the classrooms. And so with them installing the cameras, they also now have a feeder to the sheriff's department so that they can be able to see if there's anything that's going on that shouldn't be going on, and that way they can immediately be able to react to those situations. So those were some of the discussions that were being had. We have several more meetings. We haven't gotten the schedule for the next meeting, and even Speaker Rawson actually came to that meeting. He usually doesn't come to study committee meetings, but that shows how important that particular one. And usually our study committees doesn't usually start till kind of way out into like June or July or something like that. So we know it's a priority.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things that I want to circle back to. So I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying that the state of Georgia passed legislation that gives school districts the right to decide how or if they will allow their school officials to be armed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so then I hadn't even considered the point that you made. School districts where the sheriff might be so far away that someone needs to be closer to the situation who is armed. I had not considered that at all. So it does add a couple of layers to that issue, and it's not just a matter of that most people talk about it and we say, oh, that's too dangerous, or because teachers have biases or administrators have biases against certain types of students, so we shouldn't do that. So, Dr. Jones, in your district, I don't want to ask you your personal opinion, I guess, or put you on the spot in terms of think the teacher administrators should be armed or not, but where does your district sit in terms of not exactly being urban, not exactly being rural? So
we actually have a combination. We have some schools that are in downtown Macon, right on the outskirts, and then if you go down to South Bibb, they call it Sub-South Bibb, then it's very rural. And so we have a little bit of both. What we've been able to do, though, is one, the idea of putting cameras inside all the classrooms, we've done that. And we also have it now so that we have a double security when you come into our schools. So you first come into a vestibule, then you're buzzed into that, and then you're also then buzzed into the main office. We also have resource officers at every high school and middle school. And this past year, we did a small pilot at one of our high schools just looking at metal detectors to see if that's something we want to do. Having said that, I think I mentioned earlier my son is a high school teacher. I don't need my son carrying a weapon in school. I mean, I love him. He's good. He used to be a coach. But truthfully, people who are trained, who know what they're doing, are the ones who should do that. I personally am not in favor of even having ROTC people be responsible for doing that. I think that what we have to do is just make sure our schools are safe, our students feel safe, and everybody talks about this is who should be in our building or not. I'll give you one example. I was at a high school this past year, and I walked into the hallway from one of the side entrances, and the door was not locked. Doesn't do a lot of good if you're going to have a metal detector and you don't have somebody on every metal detector and every door is locked. In some of our facilities, you have to go outside to get to the next building. Yeah. We even have that in elementary building. It just creates different situations. And so I don't think every situation can be fixed with one solution, but I do believe that security is something that we all need to pay more attention to. it's my hope that as the federal government and as the state government looks at how they can help us, more resource officers deciding how we can respond will be very beneficial in that regard. I was just reading an article in the AJC today about a shooting that happened in a facility, and 2 individuals pulled their weapons out to actually go help. But when the police got there, they didn't know who was who.
Right.
And they ended up putting those 2 guys who actually ended up being heroes in handcuffs in the back of their car, and they just got lucky that they were able to sort through it quick enough. And so I think less confusion is better. I'll share with you what I share with our parents. We need more parents to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
They need to lock their guns up. They need to make sure their students don't bring them to school for show and tell. And if students have issues, tell the school administrator so we can deal with it up front. Relationships will solve this more than a good guy with a gun.
That's a valid point that you make as well. I just came from the Black Educators Rock Conference in Jacksonville, and the recurring theme, all of the presenters, regardless of what their content area may have been or what area of professional development they worked in, everything went back to relationships. And relationships are key on all levels, from the top down, administrators, all the way down to the students.
It starts with bullying and those complaints that happen. It goes with social bullying. All of that's important. But truthfully, if parents and students find an adult that they can trust, we're able to attack those and address them up front and not let students go in. You know, I have some parents who say, I told my kid to hit back.
Yes.
That's not the right answer.
Yes.
They go to jail when they do that.
Okay, now I want to pick back up quickly on the whole cameras in the classroom. What was the reaction from teachers? They found out, and I want both of y'all to answer that. Okay, a camera is going to come in, even though it is to serve the purpose of securing the classroom from a safety aspect. I could see how a lot of teachers might be concerned that it's going to open them up to some other type of criticism.
So we have 2 systems in Macon Bibb. First, the main purpose for our cameras is to help a teacher see themselves teaching students. And the idea was that if you can have pro athletes watch themselves on tape, why can't you let a teacher watch themselves as well?
True.
And then, so part of that pay for performance was at least once a month, each grade level or professional learning community had to take a video and share it with somebody else so they could then give good feedback to the teacher so they could improve. That was one. The second part is that with us, the camera that the teachers had, they turned it on and turned it off. They also gave permission to the principal or administrator so that they were able to view their camera. And so it was not Big Brother coming in to watch. So for us, it was instruction first. We do have a separate feed that is not as high in resolution that goes directly to our campus police, and that is for safety and security. And it runs 24/7. But not everybody can get that. Principals could not ask for it. I could not ask for it. There was a process we put in place so that the only reason we went to it was when a teacher or an administrator said, here's a situation with discipline or violence, and we now need to get the tape.
Okay.
And so we have not had any pushback from that regard, and we've not used it for disciplinary issues or evaluation purposes in that.
Well, I'm really excited about the thought of cameras being in the classroom, and more so because I passed legislation, was signed into law in 2016, House Bill 614, the Landon Johnson Act, that will allow video cameras in the classroom, special needs students who are in self-contained classrooms. And there were a lot of pushback that we received, and one of them dealing with money, the cost of putting the cameras in there. So when I was at the school safety committee meeting and I heard some of the school districts saying, oh yeah, we have cameras, I got all excited because I said, oh, they helped resolve the situation that we had when we originally brought the bill up. And it was for not just protecting the students, but also protecting the educators as well. And then, like you said, you all are able to use it as a tool to help enhance the teaching profession, as far as other teachers being able to watch, because some students do very well with certain type of students and others might not do well. And so it was a overall bill that was going to be beneficial to everyone, from the parents being comfortable about what was going on with the kids, most of them that were nonverbal or had difficulty in expressing what might have happened. So when I heard it, I just got all excited. Now I know Bibb County, so I'm doing my little checklist off of there. But We did this legislative past session in our budget. We did allocate money for to go towards school districts for school safety, and so the school districts can apply for a grant to be able to obtain that money that's coming down. And a couple of the things that the superintendent mentioned that I did want to piggyback off of that some of the other school districts had mentioned, which were increase in safety officer or resource officers. And they said that was a big issue because not having the money. And then one particular school district said they were able to partner with getting additional grants by partnering with the local sheriff's department and school. And so not just looking at it on an education perspective,
Right.
but looking at it from a safety perspective, and then being able to see how you can access a little bit more money that normally you wouldn't think about, especially if there has been a good collaboration between law enforcement and then the school district. And then some of them said they had ended up having to eliminate their school safety resource officers and then just use the ones that were already there with the county. And then another issue was trying to identify individuals who want to be able to go become resource officers,
Yes.
and then being able to pay them well enough that make them want to stay. So there were a lot of things that had come up in the committee, and I would definitely like to encourage your audience. Anytime we have study committee meetings, they're always recorded and they're open to the public. So if they visit house.ga.gov on that front page, you can be able to scroll through and see the different study committees, and then you can click on the YouTube video, and you can be able to hear the entire proceedings. So you don't have to physically be there.
Yes.
To be able to hear what's going on, and all the study committees are also archived as well.
Representative Stovall, you do a lot in the community, in the Clayton County, in your district, to just educate people around a whole lot of things. So are there any particular programs that you'd like to highlight today and let the audience know about?
I'm sure I do. Sometimes I forget all the stuff that I'm doing till people remind me about it. But one particular, 2 annual events I do every year. One is recognizing parents who volunteered 12 hours or more in their children's classroom. So we shut down part of the bridge in Monroe, and we call it Dance on the Bridge. And I give out personal certificates to each parent who has volunteered those 12 hours or more, and we dance and have a good time on the bridge. And so that's one annual event I've been doing since being elected. The second event I do is the career job fair, because I believe that education is the key. And once you get the education, you want to look at, what is the workforce looking like? And when you're talking about corporations looking at being able to come into certain communities, they want to know that they have a good workforce and that they are trainable. And so one of the things we do with the career job fairs, we offer it every year, and I've been doing that since being elected as well. And this year we're kind of doing a little different twist with it, being that a lot of corporations now are looking for more, not such as on the educational high level, but more experience. And so that means internships, apprenticeships, and programs like that. So we're trying to do maybe a little twist with it this year to do a little bit different. The most recent event that I was appointed chair of was a House Study Committee for the revitalization of Atlanta State Farmers Market.
Yes.
So the State Farmers Market is the largest of 9 markets that are owned and operated by the state of Georgia. And with that particular market sits on 150 acres. And so for years, there's been a lot of talk about how do we revitalize it, how do we bring life, and the purpose of the farmers market was to bring exposure to our farmers around the state of Georgia. So we want to look at how do we revitalize, how do we bring new, fresh ideas into that area, how do we increase tourism for that area, how do we look at urban agriculture for our students, them learning what does farm to table mean, how do we create a training facility there, and then just having a place for the community to be able to come in the evening. And the idea kind of hit me real strong. It was unfortunate we had the hurricane recently, but I looked at on 75, there was a lot of cars that were coming into Clayton County, and they were backed up. I said, ooh, that's a lot of money. I was counting. I said, they're going to spend money somewhere. And so I said, oh, we're going to have to, work together. So I was able to work with my colleagues and work with the Speaker's office to get the committee started. And so we'll soon be having community meetings which are open to everybody to be able to come out. And so once we have those meetings confirmed, I'll definitely share them with you so you can be able to share them. We want everybody, so it's not just a Metro Atlanta thing. We want to see make this a catalyst for the state of Georgia, being that agriculture is our #1 commodity, and as far as money that is received in the state.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I have been placing a focus this summer specifically on how do we get youth involved in the political process. You mentioned so many things that you're doing just in your district alone, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't know, and then you talked about all the legislation that has passed, and people don't even know the process of how things happen and how they come down the pipeline and how they end up with Dr. Jones, and now he has to implement with his staff. So how do we get young people to understand this process and want to be involved in this process? And I want both of you to answer that question.
I think it starts early on. It starts at an early age. I know for me and my two sisters, my dad started us early. We were going with him to community meetings, school board meetings, and then even when my mom and dad went to vote, they took us right along with them to vote, and they took the time. But I know that's an atypical type of situation. Right. And so I think, I know we just did a study committee that was created and passed. We do a lot of study committees, as you can see, yes. On civic education. How do we increase or make better civic education? And I think that's going to be one of the keys. And the other one is our local nonprofits. Kind of helping them to engage the young people a lot more. And with all, especially with all the protests and all the unrest that's going on just here in the state and even nationally, it's a time for us to help educate our young people that protesting is good, but it's two sides. Yes. You have those who protest, and then you have the policy-making side. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. The protest gets us activated as elected officials. Yes. But then we know at the end of the day, does that person vote? Are they registered to vote? Is their whole family? And if they register, are they going to vote?
Yes.
That makes a difference at the end of the day. So I think more education and letting the kids know, understanding how important that vote is. Even though you might think that one vote doesn't make a difference, I've seen plenty of races where one person, 2, 20, and 30 have made a difference into who that person is that's going to represent you. Because you want to elect someone that's going to represent your interests. It might not be 100% in agreement. It's like some of my constituents don't agree 100% with whatever I do, but I'm able to explain to them how to come to that. And then if I find out I've done a wrong vote, I'm able to say, okay, I apologize. The information I had at that time was this. Mm-hmm. Now I have new information, and then that way I can move forward from that. So I think getting them engaged, bringing them down to the state capitol. We allow a lot of the students to come down as pages, but that's usually only one student can come down at a time. But I think it has to be a whole community rallying together to understand that the politics and policies is not going away, and it's not something that has to be separated. It has to be a part of every conversation, because what we're doing at the state capitol, what's going on nationally, and then locally, you have to understand what happens on the local level with your mayor, city council, school board, that end up hiring people just like Dr. Jones here to be able to do a good job, but those are policymakers. And so I think just educating them, starting off and getting them interested, I think it's the first step, but they got to know, kind of know how to come in and get involved. And then we as legislators and policymakers have a part to do as well as helping to go out and educate our constituents.
Okay.
My thought is in BIB, our vision statement is that we want students to demonstrate strength of character and be college or career ready. The vision statement has to be more than a statement. So when we say we want them to demonstrate strength of character, what does that mean? Right. For us, that is part of what you're talking about. And so how do you get students as early as elementary involved in this process? In BIB, we're very fortunate. Our community invested in a program called the Leader in Me. Leader in Me is, in fact, it was like over $2 million they raised so that every school could become a part of this. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People is what this is about. So we're teaching that to elementary students. The very first part of that, the first 3 habits, are creating a private victory. So students realize they control their own destiny. And so what we've learned and what we see is that elementary level, students are now demonstrating that character. They're trying to figure out how to step forth and be a part of the school council, how they can be a part of student council, how they can be involved in different activities. If you take something as simple as boy state and girl state, they go off, they learn the political process, they understand how to vote and what that means. What we're trying to do in BIB is build leaders for every student so they have that experience. I was watching band camp this past week as students were getting ready for the new year. Students are leading students and getting involved in that process, and so that becomes part of it. I'm going to give you another part, though, and it's where high school students can go mentor elementary students, and they demonstrate that part as well, because all of this is saying that it's bigger than what you are, is what you can do to invest. I'm going to give you one last one, and then I'll stop. We need more teachers. And the current dialogue that's going on where it says education's bad, where the school is not doing what it needs to do, has led to a point where we do not have enough students in the colleges of education to get all the teachers we need. I think it's fine for when people want to beat up on education, but now they have to recognize the consequence. And so that means you need to invest more, you need to give it respect, and you need to get it so that people are willing to become a part of that process. Again, I'm very happy in BIB we have this idea going where this is going to be our first year. A couple other systems are doing it, but we're looking now at students who are in their final year of college, and they're in a college of education. If they're willing to come and student teach and intern with us for a year, we're now taking one of our best teachers, putting them to overwatch 2 of those students, and paying those individuals $15,000 as a paid fellowship or internship, trying to increase this. And so I think it's fine to say education needs to get better. You can't do it by beating up on everybody, so that now it's not a place where people want to work. And so if anybody wants to come work in BIB, we're looking. Give us a call.
There are a couple of other school districts as well that I saw posts today that they're looking for well over 200 teachers, and school starts in just a couple of weeks. So you're absolutely right. We are in a critical position right now to get qualified teachers in front of students, and I think that's a great thing that you're doing to lead the way and provide a paid fellowship, and that adds a level of professionalism to education that we haven't previously seen. It's, you know, you student teach and you're still basically a broke college student. And then you go into education and you know the pay is not going to be the highest pay, but it becomes like a spiral in terms of getting into a financial tunnel that you sometimes can't get out of. So I think that's a great model to follow. On my previous show, on July 1st, I interviewed Democratic candidate for state school superintendent, Mr. Otha Thornton. And we know that we are also on the brink of a very historic governor's election. So I want to ask each of you, what are some priorities that you would like to see our soon-to-be newly elected governor and state school superintendent focus on once they're in office, whoever they may be?
I'm hopeful that they will make education a priority and that we will be able to see a unified front. Again, I'm not a politician, but I would love to see the governor and the state school superintendent work together so that they're able to have one focus as we move forward. Over the past couple of decades, that's not been the case. I'm also hoping that, just like Zell Miller did, someone will be able to go back and invest in the teachers, as I just talked about, so that it becomes a profession where people can say, yes, go into it. Yes, it's a good paying job. And yes, they will take care of you. And they believe in you. And so I'm hopeful for that. I know there's also a lot of conversation still going on about charter schools and all of that. And my focus is help us get better. To be quite truthful, I would take anybody that can help us. The representative and I were talking earlier about Dr. Eric Thomas coming with the idea of turnaround and trying to help. And in BIB, we jumped on board because I want anything that can help us get better.
Yes.
But I would tell you, sometimes you get too much of a good thing. And so let's be focused on what it is we're doing, be clear with our theory. Because this is something I say. The state of Georgia has education rules, they have policies, they have laws. That is the format that they say should work. Fund it, believe in it, and help us make it better. And then lastly, Gwinnett County and the Governor's Office of Student Achievement are working on several ideas. One is a leadership academy where they are taking potential principals who want to be turnaround principals, invest in them, and make that work as well. So I just believe in developing the adults in the building, and so I'm hopeful the governor will whoever it is will be able to say education's priority. I'm going to fund it. I'm going to make it so that people want to be a part of it, and we're going to have one clear vision that we're going to stick to improve education in Georgia.
Well, I liked all that what Dr. Jones said. But I'd like to add to that, and for the state of Georgia, because it's made up of a lot of moving parts. And education is, we spend about, I think this last fiscal year, out of our $26.2 billion budget, about $742 million goes to K through 12 and higher ed. So the money is being allocated there. I think when it gets down to how it needs to be dispersed out, as far as, I know on the Reform Commission we talked about, one of the things that came up was a per student formula, being able to dedicate a certain amount for each child, because QBE is really not working. It's so confusing. I think it's only a few people that know exactly how the formula works. And so knowing that we already say education is top priority, I agree with them when it comes down to profession of education. And we don't look at educators in the profession like we do doctors and lawyers. So being able to kind of redirect that focus, and I know with the establishment of the Leadership Academy, I was on that particular study committee as well. And so I was glad to see that movement, because that shows that we know that everything rises and falls on the leaders. And so making sure that they have what they need to be able to be effective leaders is very important. So I think education, but I think taking the outlook of, at the end of the day, where is it that we want every child, once they leave the shores of the schools, whether, no matter where the school, whether it's private, whether it's public, non-traditional, traditional, because at the end of the day, we're wondering about that tax dollar. How are we going to be able to have working class citizens in our state to generate the money so we can have revenue to be able to spend on things that we want to be able to spend. So I think if the focus is on that, instead of, we always kind of looked at it backwards, but if I think if we take is, what is that we want the high school graduate to have when they leave whatever school it is, and how do we work together in a collaborative manner to be able to make sure that it's ensuring that that's possible. And then being able to work with our private sectors, which we've been able to do, but even including even now, like I said, about internships, apprenticeships. I think the college and career academies have been doing good, but we can improve on those, because if you don't have enough teachers that are certified that be able to teach those CTAE courses, then you have kids that are going through maybe 3 years, and then when they get to their senior year, they can't complete it because there's no teacher that's certified in that area. So now you have a disappointed child, disappointed parent, and then now the workforce is going to lack, because you're thinking you're getting a child coming out being ready, but they're not ready. So I think it's a collaborative effort when it comes down to education, and I think more so is listening to the worker bees that are at the bottom of the food chain, because we've been letting the direction coming from the top and not from the bottom. And I think if we can flip that around, I think we'll see a lot more progress in education. Healthcare is another one, because if you don't have a healthy individual, they can't go to work. If you don't have healthy kids, they can't come to school. And if they're not in school, they're not learning. They're doing something, but they're definitely not learning. So I think kind of taking that whole focus a lot more that we could talk about, but I think those two are key, because when corporations and international are looking at whether they want to do business in Georgia, we're known as the #1 state to do business, but sometimes it doesn't seem like that, especially on the ground level. So I think of kind of taking a focus in education and how do we work closely more with collaboration with workforce, and then also looking at our healthcare system and how do we be able to better deliver healthcare to all Georgians, no matter whether you have a high income, a low income, a middle income, because at the end of the day, if you're not going to work, we're not generating money, and we can't have all these other extra services that we want to provide, it's going to be impossible for us to be able to do that.
I love that you brought in healthcare, because that's something that we talk about all the time for the students as well, in terms of wraparound services for them. But we do overlook that for the teachers, and we have a lot of teachers who are depressed and on medication and self-medicating, and the stress of the job, and then also their other life issues, and then the finances behind the pay issue. So it just gets compounded. I'm glad you mentioned that. And we have a a question from a viewer, Rhonda Robinson. Rhonda, thank you for tuning in and for participating. I love that. Although you have less individuals majoring in education, which contributes to the teacher shortage, you also have many educators leaving the arena for what they see as not a lot of support from the local, district, and state levels. How do we address this concern? I think some of your comments have already spoken to that, but maybe just kind of sum that up for Rhonda.
I tend to think the way you do that, well, first of all, recognize you have 180 different school systems, and then you have so many charter city systems as well. So it turns out to be 195, all making independent decisions. But the way I think it works is I just believe people have to come to a place where they want to work. A great workplace means you got great coworkers, and you want to come and spend time with them, and you're willing to talk with them and share, communicate, and grow. And that's what we're attempting to do in BIB. And sometimes that's a hard decision because it may mean a person may do their job, but nobody wants to work with them. And parents don't want to work with them. And so you got to be able to deal with that reality. The other part of it, which is related to education, to health benefits, though, is just social emotional learning.
Yes.
And we are now investing greatly in that. We just hired 3 behavior specialists that are going to help us work with our students and teachers, because teachers aren't trained to deal with that.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I've seen some classroom where some second graders, third graders have just torn up some classrooms. And teachers don't want to have to deal with it.
Right.
And truthfully, again, in some of the other schools, they just put them out and say, go back to your public school. Well, we can't do that. We deal with all of them. So I think it becomes more education and more understanding is the way for us to work on that.
I just want to let everybody know, Georgia was the first state to put school climate into legislative structure. And so that kind of shows that we know that school climate is important. We talk about even with school safety. The climate of the school, whether the kids feel comfortable with going to the leaders in the school, whether they feel comfortable telling their parents what's going on. And even with the teacher, going back to what he was saying, does a teacher feel excited when they enter into the building, or they're dreading having to get up to go to the school building on that day to be able to deliver their best education that they can put forth for the kids. And so I think that all of that plays a role, and I know one of the things we did with legislation, and I have to keep going to legislation because it's policy, and everybody's going to have to follow policy. We did allow, right now, the Superior Court judges in each one of the counties develop a committee, and on that committee they look at all types of things that are going on in the schools. So this particular legislation, what it did was add school climate to them looking at what's going on in the different schools. So they now have to evaluate that and give their recommendations on how to handle now school climate along with discipline and some other stuff that they were looking at. So we're trying to move forward as a state with establishing a leadership academy. I think it's going to be beneficial as well. Being able to hear from those districts and those experts who've done a great job with trying to retain teachers that end up having a long standing of teachers that just don't want to leave. In some districts, having it in all the districts, but that means somebody's doing something that's good or what those teachers feel is good in that particular area. So trying to see how do we mimic that. And I know you have different communities. You don't have a lot of people that want to move to rural Georgia to work as teachers because there's nothing else down there to do. And then the pay might not be the same as it is in the metro area where they're able to get paid more. So the perks are not there. So been trying to figure out a way, how do we make it accommodating for those in rural Georgia, the same as they are in metro Atlanta, Georgia. And I think that being able to look at how we look at professional education and being able to take that up a notch, like you said, they're doing the pay for performance. That might be another thing. I know that came out in our Reform Commission meeting as well, but the issue came up which he addressed was, okay, does that really mean pay for performance, or does it mean something else? Because that was a strong conversation that was made on that. So I appreciate your viewer bringing that up. And I think the more we have teachers speaking out and really saying, this is what we think, and y'all offering us a solution, because I'm not an educator, didn't go to school for education, but I just have a passion because I have a child, so I was his and her first educator as a parent. But having a passion to see him and knowing how important education is. But I need to hear from people like you. I need to hear from superintendent telling us, okay, now y'all made that policy. I don't think that was the best policy. You know, y'all might want to tweak it a little bit, in which we hear a lot with the education committee. So I also encourage your viewers to come, if they're able to come to our education committee meetings when we have them during session, and I know it's usually when they're at work, so they can always view them and send in emails about, well, hey, I heard this came up in the committee. I heard that you all are considering this particular legislation. This is how it's going to affect, you know, me in the classroom. Because the more we hear, the more we can make better decisions.
So that expectation of getting the youth involved, we need to also challenge the teachers to become more vocal as well. Well, thank you both for sharing so much valuable insight. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know how they can reach out and connect with you, and also let them know about any upcoming events that you have going on.
Greatly appreciated. So with us, we have a program called Let's Talk. You can just Google Bibb County or Google Curtis Jones, Superintendent Bibb, and when you get to our website, you can click on a button that says Let's Talk, and you're able to share with us any comment, complaint, or any observation that you make, and we guarantee that we will respond to your submission within 3 business days. And so that's how you can reach out. We have new teacher orientation happening next week. We're bringing on board 250 new teachers.
Nice.
But we're very excited because what we're able to do is take those new teachers and we put them through 5 days of training called Get Better Faster, where our new teachers are able to, in theory, and in last year we did it for the first time, get up to speed within 90 days as well as any teacher that has 3 years experience.
Wow.
So we're very excited about that. And again, our first day of school is the first Monday in August.
All right. Thank you, Dr.
Well, I do have, like I said, mentioned earlier about the revitalization of the Atlanta State Farmers Market. So we definitely want to hear from individuals. If you ever visit the State Farmers Market, we want to hear from you. And so I can be reached. I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Valencia Stovall. My website is gostovall.com. And also I want to talk about the single parent day. So we were able to pass a bill in the state of Georgia, signed into law, that designates single parent day in the state of Georgia. It's March the 21st. And it is a national single parent. So on the federal level, it was a proclamation done by President Reagan back some years ago, well, when he was alive, of course. And so we want to designate Georgia to be able to identify, because we know that single parents have certain resources that are needed, and a lot of people become single parents not by choice, but because of circumstances that happen. And so we'll be talking about that a lot more, about what resources we're going to have bringing forward for single parents.
Very good. All right, this has been very informative. I hope you all learned as much as I did from Representative Stovall and Dr. Jones. Before I sign off, I just wanted to take a moment to briefly as I can, recap my time down in Jacksonville at the Black Educators Rock 2018 Rock Conference. First of all, thank you to CEO and co-founder, the visionary behind the conference, Dr. Melissa Nolan Chester, for just giving a platform for some of the nation's greatest educators to come together, to collaborate, to learn from each other, and to talk about the solutions that are going to move education forward across this nation. I had an excellent time. I was able to meet some of the people that I look up to and follow, and kind of try to model my practice after. So I just want to thank everyone who was there. And I want to challenge all the teachers who heard about it and you were skeptical, who were wondering what was going on. You needed proof of concept. You don't need proof of concept on this. You will never get this level of professional development all in one place at one time for the price, the registration fee. They almost were giving it away. We had in the picture that you just saw there, and hopefully my producer can bring it back up, the group picture. There's Principal Baruti Kafele, Dr. Chika Akua, Dr. Marcus Jackson, Robert Jackson, author Tommy Mabry, Sean Hurt. So many names that we see and we follow and we know their work. There we go. Marlena Valentine, and Dr. Chester's there in the front. Principal Salome Thomas L. These, like the cream of the crop. And then there's someone standing there. I think that's me, Dr. Marquita Blades. who just was thankful, honey, that my name was in the same program as these people, and just blessed to be in their presence. So, again, to anybody who missed the Rock Conference, I'm not going to sugarcoat. Yes, you did. You missed a treat. You did miss out. And so you want to make plans now to be there next year. So just stay tuned. Also, and this is an unofficial commercial, so please don't get me, Chanel Lee, who is the coordinator for the Georgia chapter, we will be meeting in person Friday, July 20th. I cannot quite remember the name of the location because this is unofficial, but go to Black Educators Rock on Facebook, Georgia chapter. All of the information is there if you want to become a founding member of the chapter. I do believe that you still have time to do that. So reach out, connect with us. We have some great plans to do some awesome work. You heard about what's going on in Bibb County. I'm sure other counties are doing things and making strides. You heard about all the great work that Representative Stovall is doing. So we all need to step up and make whatever contributions we can make to do our part as well. Also, you just saw covers of my 2 upcoming books. One of them is already on pre-sale. It's called Chronicles of the Chronically Ill. So you can go to my website, drmarquitablades.com, to pre-order a signed copy. And then also next month, I believe, the Mediocre Teacher Project will come out, and it's an anthology of stories from teachers where we kind of tell you the good, bad, and the ugly of what it's like to be an educator, and most importantly, how you can get past that and reignite your passion for the field that you first fell in love with. Again, I want to thank you all for joining me today. It has been my pleasure to sit with Dr. Jones and Representative Stovall. On July 29th, I am doing a special 5th Sunday broadcast because I'm usually only on 1st and 3rd. I will be sitting one-on-one with world-renowned scholar, educator, speaker, author, Dr. Chika Akua, and we are going to be talking about some of the cultural reasons why the African American community historically does not participate in the political process. So we'll be picking up on some of the things that you all talked about. And then he'll also be talking about some of his other work that he's involved in. So join me on July 29th for a special 5th Sunday broadcast of the Dr. Marquita Blades Show here on live TV on the brand new Status Network, The Future of Broadcasting. I will see you next time.